possibly go to Thailand. The princess wants it for one of the houses that we stay in.
So I'm going to ask you a question when you're ready. Tell me you're ready. You ready?
Yeah.
Quiet, Eden! Here we go. So
close the no, we need to close the glass door because the sound is
yeah, dodgy.
Is dodgy. Well, upstairs it's worse because you get more of a. So,
I will ask you the question when you sit down and are composed. Stash, let me ask you a question. It's been 45 or something years since Brian died. What do you think he would make of this cult that has formed around his work and his life and persona and indeed his death to this very day, even as we speak every day on the internet? What do you think he'd make of it?
69, 70, 30 to 2000. 46 years. If we want to be precise, and it'll be this summer. What would he make of it? He'd be absolutely astounded. Indeed, I'm astounded on a daily basis by all the attention that is still lavished, the sort of Brian Jones cult that has arisen, the fact that the Rolling Stones themselves have endured all that time. It's just absolutely incredible. Therefore, one's own memories of those times are still considered to be of interest to some people, which is amazing to me. I'll tell you a funny story. I was working on a book at Thames and Hudson on a scholarly work on alchemy, and my late editor, who's a wonderful man, very, very scholarly, called David Britt, I arrived one day and he said, you know, he said, Stanislaus, somebody called here. They wanted to interview you about the 60s, he said. You know, and they were talking about the 60s as if it was a period of hoary antiquity and great interest. Ha, ha, ha. And we both laughed and dismissed the thing as ridiculous. And that was probably in the late 70s. And, you know, the whole thing was inconceivable even then.
And you said Brian would be amazed, but would he be pleased? Would he be perturbed? What would his emotion be, do you think? He finally got the, to me, it seems like he finally got the recognition he didn't get.
No, I mean, Robert Fraser used to compare Brian Jones, or being with Brian Jones, to being with General de Gaulle, you know, because of the attention, of the whole fuss people made and so on. It's not like he was totally neglected by any stretch of the imagination. Going somewhere with Brian Jones was always an event. You know, yes, people didn't have the high regard, but the young, you know, it was not, he wasn't an obscure individual who's been totally forgotten. He was, to some extent, his part in the history of the Rolling Stones is slightly faded because human nature, I call it, not the best aspects of human nature, but you know, if you've had an ex-wife or a girlfriend or somebody that you were passionately in love with, and you've fallen out, the way you tend to look at that person, especially after so many years, memory the perception that one has of these things is alters slightly. So somebody like Keith, for instance, has been extraordinarily harsh in a way never really mentioning Brian anymore, probably because of all the things we talked about before, all these long accumulated resentments, these, you kind of tend to remember the rough rather than the smooth, and also probably the hurt that was felt when Brian did die, coupled with very mixed emotions. So, once Keith said publicly and on film, he said, after all we've been through, you're gonna go and die. It was like it's this form of disbelief and a difficulty. And at the same time, they carried that what it became, that Rolling Stones brand, so much further that those groups that say no Brian, no Stones, or no Jones, no Stones, you wonder about that, because who can tell if they would have risen another manner. You and I know of so many examples that I could, for instance, the Pink Floyd. The Pink Floyd was created virtually by Syd Barrett, who was my very good friend and who led them. He was their undisputed leader. Well, he died and they took it to greater and greater things. Pink Floyd still exists, and they never sort of would have said, well, nobody started any group saying no Syd, no Floyd.
Can you say something sweet or poignant about Brian that might be sentimental in a way to end the film? How lovely or touching, or he gave you a gift, or there was a gentle side.
The strangest thing I can tell you, but now it verges onto a subject that I've avoided discussing publicly. I will tell you this. There are people, and since the people that I'm involved with are involved with not with mere extrasensory perceptions, but the relationship the dead are to the living. And without going into spiritism or anything, smacking of old ladies with teacups, I've had a few extraordinary experiences in a realm which can be best classified as the occult. And there are those times when you feel the presence of somebody in a very intimate manner. In Italy, there's a group of people who are utter Brian Jones devotees, and they decided that they just loved me by extension. And they came to visit last year, bringing extraordinary gifts, but really very, very generous things. And their, as it were, leader, who's an author who writes on television shows and so on, was a very scholarly person, has some extrasensory gift. Well, among the many things they gave me, including a portrait of Brian, which is of debatable artistic worth, but very sweet, so I hung it in my library, which I would never have done, but the gesture was so touching, that people would give you all these things, all these photographs, all these many, many gifts of all kinds. Among these things came a special message from this lady who doesn't speak one word of English, but not even, hello, how are you? She can't even say things like that. She's one of those Europeans, Italians, who just doesn't, know English, whatever. She said, I've received this message from Brian for you. and there was a kind of scroll, and she said she'd written it by dictation, by a kind of dictation. The message on it was so extraordinarily, because it was so Brian in a way, you know, with somebody who couldn't possibly have thought in that way, and he stressed that one should never give up on nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. To follow, basically, the meaning of that message was follow whatever dreams you have, because everything is available to you. And the message ended with this expression, little brother. And I could feel, you know, it seemed, I've only communicated this to a couple of people because obviously you don't want to, you know, most people dismiss that kind of thing as absolute nonsense. I would too. But then again, something else, only idiots dismiss what they don't know at all. And, you know, within the infinite possibilities that have been unveiled by things like quantum physics and so on, there is no reason. There are other instances where the dead have spoken through dreams and have prefaced their appearance by saying, well, you see me this way, but that's because, obviously I'm not like that anymore, but for you to perceive, you have to see it like that. So it's like a projection, a holograph or a mask. Consciousness endures beyond the grave. That's without a doubt what the Tibetans are on about. Some people are able to say that. This woman who claims she's in touch with Brian, and I have no reason to doubt that she could very well be, she said that Brian blames himself for a lot of things and nobody else. But it is very touching. I have always felt this closeness to still to this very day. I feel that I will sit at the piano, you know, and play, and play with my eyes closed. And at times when I want certain things to happen, I say, and let Brian take over. And with this sort of energy, an energy will do it. And will do extraordinary things musically, which I've never claimed any of that. Those things to me are very sacred because I can only play because of certain people, Ike Turner being one of them, and you know, after having hit a sort of, you know, being circumscribed by a kind of complex about people like Hendrix, Brian, Mick Jagger, we picked up the guitar together and he got ahead, I didn't. And then suddenly I could play because Ike said you've got to let it become make it your own thing, as it were. And keyboards I hadn't played since I was a child, you know, much younger than Eden. And people, when I was very small, I played with the piano. They wanted me to learn. In those days, there was a lot of physical punishment whenever you made any kind of mistake. And it put me off for decades. Now I can sit, if I allow this to happen, I can sit blindfolded and play all this stuff. It'll just flow out, whatever it is, harpsichord or any of those things. I don't play people's songs. I'm not interested in doing any of that stuff. I only play original music, but to do that, you have to let it happen. And it does come from what I have termed the absolute elsewhereness of being. which is something that I'm very interested in, much more than, you know, the incidental anecdotes of one's life.
If you could speak to Brian just for a couple of seconds or a minute or something, what do you think what would you say to him? After everything that's happened and everything that's transpired, what would you say to Brian?
I would say that I will always, I understand, and I always will go with love rather than anything else. The only times I intervene and say this is wrong because of that is because people get it wrong. People look at it with modern eyes. You have to look at these things with the eyes of the time, of how it went, who people were, how old they were. I even, you know, Keith Richards was sorry about what he said, wrote about me, but he didn't need to be sorry because I didn't never bear a grudge, for the simple reason that friends are allowed to say whatever what they say is upon them. It's their responsibility. I'm not going to throw a hissy fit. And in fact, in a funny way, what Keith said about me, he did say one thing that was so extraordinary that everybody said, you have to use that on your book. What an extraordinary creature to have gone through the 20th century, which is a perfect thing to go on the cover of a book. Because indeed, one wonders about oneself, how one went through these things. I've told a lot of people that, you know, in those years, when I met Brian Jones in 1965, I was driving a 2-liter Porsche like an absolute maniac, and these women in Marbella said, that boy's going to come to a sticky end. And I said, well, we're the Never Reach 25 group, and meant it. This Never Reach 25, fuck you all, you know, my generation type of thing. Hope I die before I get old, was our philosophy. This is what we lived for. Now people want to judge this by these corporate attitudes that they have about, you know, this amazing thing that the Rolling Stones have become today. It's a completely different ball game. It's a totally different thing.
Thank you, Stash. So just for the record, you know that I was filming this and that you know I'm going to be using it. I give you my word, anything of a personal nature not relating to the subject matter, this will not be used or mentioned in any way, whether photographically or anecdotally.
That's what we said we would do. I felt I'm very glad that you graciously accepted to my what I had to say, because obviously if you...
I take it to heart, sir.
When you had... I saw you on an interview and I was furious because you were saying these various things, you know, declaring these things, which I thought...
Sorry. I was wrong.
Well, I felt they were wrong, you know, because they
Did
were...
you feel they were malicious?
I didn't think they were malicious, but I felt that you were the victim of research done through the consensus that has now developed in so...
Chinese whispers.
Apparently, yes, the Chinese game, the Chinese whispers game, and these so-called authors who... But, I mean, who's this guy now who's written this? There's a new guy who says Mick Jagger's a monster and all that. And why does he say that? Because apparently he was kicked off. I think he originated vinyl, and I don't know, I don't want to say anything liable, but I mean, the guy has some grudge against Mick, which I can understand. You can have grudge against Mick. Mick is not, you know, he's not the most loyal of persons, but he's a friend. I would never say anything bad about Mick, right. Or about any of them. From the, you know, what is just is just. You know, everybody had their faults. I've got my faults. Keith has done me an incredible service in stopping me at one stupid point of my life when I was ready to take a smack, and he forbade it. I mean, physically stopped somebody from giving it to me. And you have to, when people have stepped in your own interest, when they themselves were the victim of that, you have to respect that. Maker has been a dear friend. He may not be the most loyal or affectionate friend, but who am I, the most loyal and affectionate friend? I don't think so. I don't call people, and I keep to my own counsel, except the people I see. When I'm away, I don't see others. I have a certain reluctance about certain things. And
you mean 2 years it took me to get you to sit down like this?
Right, but I mean, also it spills into other areas of my life.
Sure.
You will not. I have a cell phone in Thailand because useful there, but nobody has the number. Not many people have the number. And I have a cell phone in Italy for very specific people. Nobody in America has that number. Therefore, nobody can call me and say, "Hi, what are you doing?" or something like that, which I loathe, and I don't answer the phone always. I knew you were calling today, so I answered the phone. A lot of people are mad as hell because I don't answer and don't pay attention to the telephone.
Well, I'm sorry I made you livid, and I think you're right. I think I'm the victim of research,
No, I blame myself, Geoffrey. If I was mad at you, it's because you said I need to speak to you, and I kind of didn't pay attention and let it ride. You said you needed this. Had we had that talk before you published, as I see that you're open-minded about these things.
I'm going to change everything that's fucking wrong. How about that? I give you my word. You tell me that you were there, I'm going to put some bogus. No, I'll have to go and pull it apart. Because I'm going to die and you're going to die and Eden will be there, and I want this to be right.
As much as we can get it right, we should get it right.
Thank you very much.
I mean, now they say things like, you see creations of yourself attributed to others. I was the one to introduce Anita to Brian. I was the one who I gave everybody everything nicknames. And Blue Lena was my own thing to suddenly come up with the name Blue Lena, and a host of other things which now have fallen into everyday parlance for people. It's amazing, but it's just incidental. It so happened to be that way.
Thank you very much, Stash.
You're welcome, Geoffrey.
Right, sir.